Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. My name is Liam, and I pick fights each and every week on the show. And today, we're breaking down UFC Vegas 81. We're talking, of course, about Sodiq Yusuff taking on Edson Jr. Barboza in the main event. It's a featherweight clash. It's going down on Saturday night. And if you guys haven't been tuned in, we just finished up with 10 weeks of Contender Series. So now the Contender Series has come to pass. It was another great season. We got a couple underdogs off last night. If you guys missed it, we closed up shop on my guy Gordo's channel, Plays and Fades. But we're back to my channel each and every week talking about the UFC as our primary target. And now we're going to be back to earlier first looks, guys, because the Contender Series I take very seriously. I do a lot of research. If you guys missed it, there were 6 fights last night. So I had a lot of extra work to do this week, made sure that I got my due diligence done. But now we're taking our first look at the UFC card that's coming up on Saturday. And it's a fascinating one, right? We always start in our first look with a surface level understanding of this, right? I'm going to do my tape, my due diligence, most of my research tonight. And then I'm going to come back to you guys with more informed, opinions. I'm also going to have a guest as well, as you guys have come to expect. So all that will be on Bets and Banter. But what we're going to do today is give you my first look at these fights as I break down this card from a top line perspective. And we start always with the main event on the first look. Sodiq Yusuff and Edson Barboza, two guys that are on different ends of the experience coin in the UFC, but they're also guys that could have, maybe different momentum under their belt. You've got Sodiq Yusuff, he's only riding the strength of a 2-fight win streak, but he's got just one loss inside this featherweight division in the UFC. So very impressive results. That loss, of course, was to Arnold Allen, a ranked featherweight who was just on the precipice of earning a title shot before losing that decision to Max Holloway. So we see that Arnold Allen has produced a ton of great results in the UFC. It's no skin off Sodiq Yusuff's nose that he lost that fight. However, he's had some other close encounters in the UFC. Not every win has been super clean and decisive, but he's the much younger fighter in this matchup. He's only 30 years of age. He's going to be standing 5'9", 71-inch reach for Sodiq Yusuff, and he's taking on the former lightweight, the very experienced UFC savvy veteran in Edson Jr. Barboza, a guy who's not a stranger to UFC main events and who's not a stranger to this featherweight division. Now, he's had several fights in this division, and he's looked pretty competent overall. I do think that his cardio has been a question mark in this featherweight division in ways that it wasn't always at lightweight. We saw him go 5 hard fives with Kevin Lee at 155 pounds, but I do think at 145 pounds, whether it was due to damage or whether it was due to fatigue, I think he was starting to slow down evidently against a guy like Giga Chikadze at 145 pounds in a previous main event showing. So this is a fight where both guys have, some things that are checking off boxes in my head, things that I like about them and things that make me a little bit concerned. If you had to point to one thing to say, Liam, why would you not be super bullish on Sodiq Yusuff? Or if you had to pick one thing about Sodiq Yusuff that makes you nervous about how he would fare against the top guys in the division, I think most people would say it's his chin. I think his skills are there. He's got good striking. He hasn't really been out wrestled cleanly by many opponents. He seems to have good and opportunistic grappling. Most people were surprised when he wrapped up the neck of Don Shainis, who tried to pursue the wrestling and the grappling as his path to victory in that fight. And unfortunately, Sodiq Yusuff just had too much for him. So when you look at a guy like Sodiq, he seems to be a guy from the Lloyd Irvin camp who's been rounding out his skills on the mat for quite some time. He seems to have been putting together, good striking skills on the feet where he can land, in that Arnold Allen fight. Allen would land these significant shots towards the end of the round. Arnold Allen's a really tactical guy, so he'd find these ways to sneak off like one really big strike, change the complexion of the round. But overall, Sodiq Yusuff was winning the minutes of that fight, broadly speaking, against a very high-level guy. So I think that Sodiq Yusuff, if he is not let down by his chin, he will be a very high-level fighter. He'll be a very difficult guy for a lot of people to contend with. I think he's got a lot of physicality as well for this 145-pound division. However, Edson Barboza, he's going to have some of those intangibles here in terms of the height and the reach, the anthropomorphic advantages. He's the taller fighter by 2 inches here at 5'11". He's going to have the 4-inch reach advantage with a 75-inch reach. And we know that Edson can be dynamic with his kicks to multiple targets. He can kick the body very effectively. He can kick the head and be extremely dangerous. And he can also go to the leg and, create a lot of havoc for his opponents. So Edson's got a well-rounded game. He can also box at a high level. He's crisp with his striking. I think the one concern that you would point to for Edson on the other side is that he can be a little bit questionable with his chin. You look at the guy, he's been around for a long time. He's fought a lot of great fighters, but he is 13-4 career to the knockout. He has been clipped on the chin several times in the UFC. Giga Chikadze stopped him more so to an accumulation of strikes. Justin Gaethje was able to put him away with a right hook in the very first round. Again, another prolific knockout artist, but maybe not a guy who's known for putting people away so early in the fight. You look at the rear naked choke loss against Donald Cerrone in round one. That was Donald Cerrone club and sub, my guy. It was a jab that put him all the way on ice skates, and quickly you saw Donald Cerrone grab a hold of that choke and close the show. Shout out to the chat, guys. I got to quickly say, our guy Contender View says, hey, bro, killed it on Contenders. Great job. I appreciate you for that. Our guy Dixon says, hi, Liam. Appreciate you guys. A lot of the regulars in the building. Appreciate everybody who's arrived. Appreciate everybody who's dropped a like so far, and I hope that you guys continue to do that. Elijah's in the building. Shout out to our guy Adam, says good evening. Our guy Mario, yes, Liam, let's go. Absolutely. And Grateful Dude says appreciating these breakdowns. Grateful for you being here, and we still got plenty of breakdowns, so we'll get right back to it here. But the bottom line is Edson Barboza is a guy that he shows a bunch of submission losses on his record as well. In the UFC, you see a couple of submission losses, I should say, just two, but they're both club and subs, right? He was a bloody mess when Tony Ferguson was able to snatch up that Darce choke and get the finish in that fight. And I think that one thing about Edson that we've seen over time, he does not respond very well to pressure. His last fight, he did a good job of, getting to the pressure of Billy Quarantillo before it had started, right? Like Billy Quarantillo is a guy that normally wants to bear down on you. And by that second and the third round, he really starts to come into his own. But in round one, he got caught cold there. He just didn't really have that opportunity to start laying into Edson with the pressure. We saw Beneil Dariush, perfect game plan against a guy like Barboza, backed him up the whole time. But then Barboza found an opportunity, jump knee, closed the show, right? He's an explosive finisher. He's dynamic. Even in a fight where he's getting pressured, he'll find opportunities. Against Kevin Lee, he hit that spinning kick and made Kevin do the chicken dance, no doubt about that. So he has the power to create these dynamic moments and opportunities. But I just think to myself, if he does get pressured, we've seen how he reacts. It's normally not a good reaction. And that's something that at 37 years of age, it's going to be very hard to train that out of your system, so to speak. So want to shout out to our guy, Lenny Manet, Maine. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but he says your knowledge is golden with the $5 dono. Appreciate you for dropping the dono, my man. It's always a pleasure to come over here and try to break down these fights for you guys. And this is my first look at this card. So I'm looking at two guys that, I like both these guys. I think they're both fun fighters. I think they both have an interesting style, but Sodiq Yusuff's taken some time off. He's probably been in the gym working on his skills, getting a lot better at the game. And I do think that Edson, a lot of his camp and a lot of his focus, I would have to think, is on the weight management. I think at this point at 145 pounds, I think it's going to take serious, lifestyle commitments from a guy like Edson to really make this weight class consistently. And at his age, the UFC certainly likes the guy. They like putting him in prime positions. They know he's willing to go out there, kill or be killed style, put on fun fights, fun scraps, get finishes, and he'll put it on the line against anybody. So the company has got to love this guy. But I also think of a guy like Sodiq Yusuff as somebody that they're looking to build up and position as a guy with a future in the division. And I don't know that they see Edson that way. I think that, he's a tweener. He's a guy that can come back and forth between different weight classes, make fun fights with guys, put on dynamic striking matches. But I do think that some of the strengths from Sodiq Yusuff on the mat include those front headlock series, include that guillotine series, that Darce choke. And those are things that have troubled Edson in the past. I don't think he likes the sensation of being choked. I think he's somebody that, that's a way that you can make him really uncomfortable. He will make people uncomfortable with the striking. And I think it'd be a mistake for Sodiq Yusuff to just hang out with this guy at range. I think he's going to try and clinch him up, force him into some exchanges where he's not comfortable, limit the engagements when they're at distance, try and pick his spots. And I think that that's critical to winning a fight like this. I think that if he's reckless and gets too engaging in the pocket, I think his chin could let him down here. So for me, this is a volatile fight. I do think that this is a main event that I would project to go under. More often than not, I think both of these guys have clear paths to finish. And I think that they both have clear paths to be finished as well. So perhaps that leads to a little bit of hesitation from these guys on the feet. But I just think eventually, if you got 25 minutes to work, I think eventually a bill will come due for one of these guys. And I don't know that I trust Edson's cardio at 145 pounds to go the full 25 minutes. And I think that on the other side, conversely, I'm not sure that I trust Sodiq Yusuff's chin to last 25 minutes if it's all on the feet with a guy like Edson who can make you pay. So, it just seems to me like a fight where it's going to end violently, but I do probably lean towards the guy who's a little bit younger here, who's a little bit fresher in the spot. Edson Barboza has been through a lot of fights, a lot of tough wars, and I don't think that we've seen Sodiq necessarily beat guys on this level of this ilk. But I do think that we're starting to see some chin regression from a guy like Edson Barboza. Bryce Mitchell, not known for his power nor his striking, went out there and dropped him in the very first round. Billy Quarantillo got flatlined in the first round, so he didn't get a chance to show off much of his game. Giga Chikadze, I thought did a good job in that fight of beating up Edson, picking his spots. And Edson's a primary striker, right? He went down. He had a primary striking matchup. It didn't go his way. This is supposed to be at his optimal weight class. This is against a guy who hasn't had as much MMA experience and who doesn't have the same ability to switch up his game and work in the grappling. So I think that Sodiq does have some power on the feet that he could try and leverage here. But I also think that his ground game is probably superior to Edson. So really interesting one for me. I'm definitely leaning towards the under. Let's take a look. I haven't looked at the prices at all for this one. Let me see if I can find a quick you know what? I'll bring up OddsJam just so I don't bias myself too much here. See if I can get a total and a money line without getting too invested in the props here. So it looks like I can only get the money line here. Everything's getting paywalled these days, folks. Bear with me. Sorry about that. I'm clicking over to best fight odds. For anybody who's wondering, that's where I'm going to source these odds from. So it's looking like minus 165 or so is the market consensus number on a Sodiq Yusuff. I don't know that I necessarily see a tremendous amount of value there, but I do think that it's probably a close to accurate line just off of a gut feeling. Let's poke over and see if I can find a total. So it looks like the total here is sitting at the under 3.5 rounds of around minus 150, minus 138 or so. I wish it was a 4.5 personally. So I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see what happens here. I think that this is interesting as well because you're looking at a contender series guy being given that main event showcase in a guy like, Edson Barboza. He's a UFC lifer, no doubt about it, but he's almost representing a different generation. And I think that the UFC is kind of trying to market these contender series guys as the future. So yeah, I think that this is going to be a Sodiq Yusuff win, but I will do my due diligence as I always do. Cheers to everybody who's rocking with us in the chat. We'll take a quick sip of coffee and it's on to the co-main event here. Next up, we've got Jennifer Maia taking on Vivianne Araújo, and this is Brazil on Brazil crime. We got two girls here that are both looking to stay relevant in this crowded flyweight division, trying to make a name for themselves, trying to get a bigger fight. And, on the one hand, Vivi is coming off of 2 losses here, 2 consecutive losses. Jennifer Maia, on the other hand, coming off of 2 consecutive wins. So initially speaking, you're going to think people are going to come in here backing Jennifer Maia. She's been getting recent success. She's left positive, fond memories in your head in recent performances. And her losses are fair. She lost to Caitlin Chukagian. She lost to Manon Farrow. She lost to Valentina Shevchenko. So she's not really losing to low-end girls in the division. But Vivianne Araújo is not really a low-end girl in the division either, as far as I'm concerned. She lost to Amanda Ribas. Amanda Ribas, another Brazilian on Brazilian matchup there. Amanda's very good on the ground. And I think that Unless Amanda got knocked out in that fight, I felt like she was going to do very well just because she's got a good takedown game. She's got a good ground game. She's got good judo. And I think she had better cardio than Vivi, just generally speaking. So that was a tough matchup for her. Against Alexa Grasso, 5-round type of, difficult fight, well contested by both ladies. I thought Alexa Grasso deserved the unanimous decision win there. I thought it was clear, but I also thought that Vivi made a fine account of herself. So I think that this is a fight where you look on paper, I'm not selling my stock totally on Vivianne Araújo yet. I do think Jennifer Maia, the thing that is good about her game, she's got a pretty meat and potatoes boxing style. She's pretty strong physically, so she can get on top of other women. She can use that leverage point, and she did that against Shevchenko. But I think we've now seen many examples of Shevchenko getting taken down and looking a little bit more liable on the mat. It took a while for it to happen in the UFC, but we've seen it with Talia Santos. We've seen it with Jennifer Maia. We've seen it with Alexa Grasso more than once. So I think that we've now seen a little bit more exposure to Jennifer Maia's takedown game, maybe not being this unique selling point, but maybe Valentina's takedown defense being a little bit more smoke and mirrors, right? When we're looking at Vivi Araújo, she does have some credible wins in the UFC. Beat Andrea Lee, Roxanne Modafferi, Montana De La Rosa, Alexis Davis, Talita Bernardo. But the loss to Jessica Ai is one I'm going to have to revisit because that's probably a fight that I would have thought she should and would have won. So that's one I'll go back and rewatch for sure. But both of these women are a little bit on the older end of things. 36 for Vivi. Wow, almost 37 compared to just 35 for Jennifer Maia. So yeah, I think that most of the indicators here do say Jennifer Maia could be slightly favored. But then on the other hand, you look at the 4-inch reach advantage for Vivianne Araújo. Maybe that's going to make it more difficult for Maia, who likes to use that boxing, to get off on her game here. And I do think that Jennifer Maia, this is a personal opinion of mine, I thought she arguably lost to Jessica Ai. Jessica Ai, she got the unanimous decision win over her. She would have been on a 4-fight losing skid had that fight gone against her. But Jessica Ai had an unfortunate cut on her face. So I thought that she was pretty soundly outboxing her, and the cut on her face led to the judges not seeing it that way. And you guys could rewatch and see if you see it differently. That's fine. We're all good to disagree on this show, but as far as I'm concerned, I just see Jennifer Maia as a little bit meat and potatoes, a little bit rote, kind of just stocky for the division as well. So I would not be surprised if Vivi was able to have more success in a matchup like this. But we'll see. We'll see. I got to do more due diligence, in fairness. These aren't two women that I'm running to the bank to fade. These aren't two women that I'm running to the bank to bet on either. They're just two women that I think could go out there and put on, a pretty boring snooze fest over 15 minutes. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Next up, guys, we got a considerably more fun booking. We've got Jonathan Martinez taking on Adrian Yanez. Yanez, I think is how he said his own name. So going to try and do him that respect. He is correcting folks this week on his name and letting people know how it's really pronounced. So bless him for it. You take a look at the measurables on this fight, guys. We've got two 29-year-olds, right? Virtual age parity here, a couple months older for Adrian Yanez. And you look at the reach, it's a 1/2-inch reach advantage for Yanez, and it is a 1-inch height advantage for Jonathan Martinez. So virtually identical frames for these two guys, virtually identical age for these two guys, and pretty similar level of experience as well. 22 professional bouts for Jonathan Martinez. And for Adrian Yanez, just 20 professional bouts. So two bouts less than Martinez. But either way, both of these guys, very seasoned fighters, 29 years of age. And I think this is a UFC trying to match up two prospects in the featured bout of the evening and saying which prospect is coming and which one's going. And not to say that, whoever loses this fight is dropping off a cliff, but just to say right now, at 29 years of age, who's ready to go right now and get this push up in the division? And I think that for Jonathan Martinez, his last time out if he had finished Said Nurmagomedov, if he had went out there and put a real stamp on that performance, then maybe he's fighting up into the, top 10 or the top 15. But instead, it was a very close fight. It could have went either way. I think a lot of people, might have thought that he was fortunate to get that one, but certainly it was a fight that was well within the margins. When you look at a guy like Yanez, his last fight, he was landing some good shots. He was getting off on some boxing, but unfortunately, he got overconfident and he was swinging wildly in the pocket with a guy who could really box in Rob Font, and a guy that, despite not having the greatest finishing record in the UFC, he has landed a lot of knockdowns. He has landed a lot of shots with power. He has busted up people's faces. The thing is, Rob Font has typically been let down by his durability, not by his power. His ability to hurt people has never been the question. It's just his ability sometimes to take it on the return because he's a little bit older in the division. He's a little bit slower with his reaction time. So I think that when you look at Adrian Yanez's last fight, he kind of forced himself into the pocket with a guy who really knows how to box. I thought Yanez was going to win that fight, but I thought it was a difficult fight. I wasn't under the illusion that Rob Font is a gimme. And Rob Font caught him. He got the best of him. And Rob Font has shown himself to be extremely tough and durable against some of the best fighters in the division. Look at what he was able and willing to endure against Corey Sandhagen, where granted that was just a grappling domination, but he survived several really deep choke attempts late in that fight. Look at, similar experiences, So I just look at a guy like Adrian Yanez. I think he could bounce back. I think he can come back and find some momentum again in this division. Did he beat the highest level guys on his march through? Tony Kelly, Davey Grant, Randy Costa, Gustavo Lopez, Victor Rodriguez, Brady Wong. No, those are not the highest level guys, but it showed me that the UFC was trying to put this guy in a position to succeed developmentally. They were really trying to get, a good matchup for him. And the Tony Kelly fight, I think, translated for him. I think it kind of broke him through a little bit and was a little bit of that star-making performance. So you look at a guy like Adrian Yanez, and he built up a big fan base, a big following, and then it didn't go his way. The other thing is true of Jonathan Martinez. He's been having all this success, but he's very quiet about it all. You'd never know unless you were watching the UFC week in and week out. So he's kind of a nightmare for the UFC in some regards, right? Where he's a really good fighter. He's very difficult. Nobody's going to want to fight this guy. But then if he does go out there and get the win, he's not going to set anybody's hair on fire with the interview. He's not going to go out there and try and market himself or be interesting. And I don't say this to be disrespectful. I'm sure there's a lot of Martinez fans out there too, but he's just not caught that same kind of fire on social media. He hasn't done the same kind of marketing. You don't hear as much from him in the media and in interviews, and he's not as public a person. And that's a trade-off in your career. And so I think that for a guy like Martinez, maybe he is just a silent killer. Maybe he's going to come in here and use his leg kicks and his kicking ability to tune him up. But I think that Adrian Yanez has dealt with a bunch of kickers. I think that when he fought the fight against Randy Costa, we saw how he's normally willing to deal with adversity. He was getting jabbed up in that fight. He was dealing with a longer opponent, and his opponent was landing some big thunderous kicks there as well. But he was able to react well. He was able to stay in his face, and he was able to break him with pressure, with power. And I do think that Yanez has real power in the pocket. I think he's a very clean boxer. So this is a tricky fight, where I thought that at the minus 110 range, I leaned towards Yanez, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. It seems like there's money coming in on the Martinez side, and that's all love, but I'm probably going to wait and kind of see what happens here, see what kind of plus money number might appear on an Adrian Yanez's side here, because I do think it's a what have you done for me lately sport. And I think people are going to say, hey, this guy just got knocked out. And so I'm out on him. But for me, I think he's a guy that's tough. I think he's a guy that the UFC wants to market and promote, broadly speaking. And so I think that they're trying to put him back on track here by putting him against tough, solid opposition and proving, hey, that's just a blip along the radar. I could still win these fights. I could beat good fighters. So that's what I expect this weekend. I think he's going to get back in the win column here. It might be a closely contested decision, but I also think that Jonathan Martinez is not above being chin-checked himself. These guys have fought common opponent Davey Grant, and Davey Grant, you could say you thought he won the decision against Yanez, but you can't say that he knocked out Adrian Yanez. And you can say that. He knocked him clean out against Jonathan Martinez, put him down badly in that spot. And that was a spot where I think a lot of people expected Jonathan Martinez to easily roll and kind of clean up a guy like Davey Grant, and instead he ended up getting folded there as a favorite. So I do think that public perception kind of comes and goes on these guys. I could poke holes in the resume and the recent run of a guy like Jonathan Martinez. Said Nurmagomedov, that's a great win. But again, a lot of people thought that was a controversial win. Cub Swanson, he's a guy who's a little bit past his best, with all due respect. Vince Morales, a guy that's really struggled at the UFC level. Alejandro Perez, a guy that's, very old and, probably not long for the UFC at this point. 34 years of age, excuse me. He's not as old as I thought, but he does have 5 losses inside the distance. So again, that was a guy who's got 5 losses inside the distance. Jonathan Martinez was not one of them. So I think that they're trying to do, oh yeah, this is great. Shout out to Just Win Baby, says no more USADA. Best news of the day. Yeah, I don't know what they were accomplishing anyway. So cheers to that. And then we've got Contender View says Davey Grant is so game though. Absolutely. I love Davey Grant. Fun fighter, but I'm just pointing to the difference in how these two guys were able to deal with him. Davey Grant probably lost the first round pretty clean against Martinez, but then he came out there and with a straight arm English banger gave him the old sleep tight. So I do think that Adrian Yanez is a student of the game. I think he's going to study a lot of Martinez's film, and I think he's going to come in with a pretty good game plan here to try and catch him on the chin. So I like this fight. I think it's a great scrap. I think it's 2 fun fighters, but I like Adrian Yanez here to bounce back, get his momentum going again. Next up, folks, we've got Michel Pereira taking on Andre Petroski, and this is another fun one. I've been talking a little bit about a theory that I have this year, where I think when you miss weight to the point where it fucks up an event for the UFC, excuse my language, that I think the UFC really gets upset with you. I think that they take it personal, and that Wonder Boy fight led to not only a cancellation of an important bout, but it led to a lot of bad press for that pay-per-view. It led to a lot of bad press in the subsequent week about whether or not they're paying Wonder Boy and this and that. So I don't think that Michel Pereira did himself any favors. And the God's honest truth is this guy is a hit or miss type of fighter. He's definitely looked more responsible in recent times, but he went out there against Santiago Ponzinibbio, a guy who has been in really difficult fights lately. Alex Morono was up 2-0 on the guy cleanly before he got knocked out in that spot. So, there's definitely been some signs of wear on Santiago Ponzinibbio. He gets the split decision nod in that fight, very close decision. Andre Fialho, he's like the only guy to not finish Andre Fialho. Tim Means finished Andre Fialho. This guy is not showing a lot of good finishing stuff. When you're looking at Nico Price. Nico Price is a guy that just got knocked out by Robbie Lawler in his retirement fight, okay? He did not get finished by Michel Pereira. So where is this finishing power? Where is this dynamic offense that we should be seeing from a guy who looks like he's on every steroid known to mankind? Chaos Williams. That fight was a good win for him. I'll just give him that. That's a fair win. Zaleem Imadaev. I thought that Zaleem Imadaev, might have been a better fighter than that, but I don't think he's ever even fought since. Yeah, that was he had 3 fights, in the UFC, lost every one of them and never fought again. So Zaleem Imadaev was just not that guy. Then Danny Roberts, I'm missing the best ones. He gets disqualified against Diego Sanchez in a fight that he was cruising and absolutely beclowned himself. He lost to Tristan Connolly, who's a career featherweight with no other relevant wins. And so I'm just looking at all this and saying, wow, Michel Pereira, he's been on hard times. Before coming to the UFC, he got knocked out by Dusko Todorovic in the first round as well. So this guy is just a little bit fugazi to me. And I think that now that he has to move up to 185, I don't think that's great. I think at 170, he was kind of having the weight bully effect. He could just feint guys into respecting him. He was big, strong, crazy. But I think at this weight class, he's going to be a lot more, average physically. He's still going to be big, no doubt about it. But Andre Petroski, I think, is going to be used to picking up muscle heads like this and trying to take him to the mat. So I do think Andre Petroski is a live underdog in this spot, just looking at it offhand. I think that Andre Petroski has mostly fought grapplers in the UFC, and he's tended to do pretty well. I think that the Brian Battle fight, everybody was like, oh my God, how did he lose to Brian Battle? And then Brian Battle just wins every fight except for against Renat since then. So I just don't think he's a bad fighter. And I think that it's possible that violence is the answer here because Petroski has slowed down at times in the past. But we were just talking about the fact that Michel Pereira is not finishing any of these guys, even guys that are pretty susceptible. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards Petroski here. I think Petroski could out wrestle him and could potentially submit him. So I have to go through and do my due diligence, do my tape study. Not going to just fire off the hip, but just letting you guys know how I feel. And I feel like Petroski is probably a live underdog. In terms of the experience side, Michel Pereira's got way more of it. If it ends up being a fight just on the feet, then I think Petroski's probably bonk or bust. But I still think that he's got some power as well. So I like the camp to the point of P-Rod. Shout out P-Rod in the chat. And I think that I like Petroski just having more paths to victory potentially. So give me Petroski here. Next up, we got Edgar Chairez taking on Daniel Lacerda. And this is one where I thought that the last fight looked marginally competitive, but it did look like a fight that was trending towards Edgar Chairez. And the problem is, I thought that Edgar Chairez was going to win in round 2 or round 3 as it was. So, the fact that he was able to beat him in round 1, and then it ended up no contesting out. Unfortunate fight, unfortunate outcome there. I don't think we're guaranteed to get the exact same result here. I do think that one liability that we saw again from Chairez in that last fight is the fact that he's liable to be taken down, and Lacerda is capable of taking him down, but it just looks like Lacerda is not capable of holding him down very effectively. And if that's the case, then I do think that it's most likely that Chairez eventually finishes him again in this spot. I do think Chairez could get clipped on the feet. Both guys are doing another quick weight cut here to 130 pounds, but it just seems like a fight where I don't want to get caught betting this one more often than not. I talk about a long-term angle for me is not trying to bet on rebooked fights. And rebooked fights, what happens? The bookies have all the information. They know where the sharps are going to be. They know what the props they're going to hit. And so it just makes it a lot harder to find value, typically speaking, unless you want to get contrarian. And that's difficult to do when we've just seen the fight play out as well. So tricky fight, but leaning towards Chairez to get the win and finally get some resolution here. But now it's also not, an important Mexican holiday. So maybe Lacerda is able to fight a little more freely. Next up, we're rounding out the main card with a fascinating bantamweight scrap. Seems to be the talk of the Twitter streets. And if you're excited to break down this bantamweight matchup like I am, make sure you drop a like on this video. But with that being said, we got Christian C-Rod Rodriguez coming back to take on Cameron Saaiman. And we've got Cameron Saaiman building some momentum in the UFC. He's got 3 wins now under his belt. He beat Terrance Mitchell. He beat Martinez. He beat Steven Kozlow. But all of them, he had to go out there and earn it. The Terrance Mitchell one was a little bit of a gimme, but they had some competitive, exchanges in the early going, and then it was just quickly a wrap once he got to the top position on the floor. Martinez gave him a run for his money, but he was able to subdue him with his wrestling there, and also by hurting Mana, if my memory serves. Steven Kozlow, I think he fouled him a number of times, but I do think that he also was able to get the finish in that fight. So Cameron Saaiman, he's done a pretty good job, building himself up. But I do think that it's interesting that he's finally fighting without our guy Dricus on the card. Dricus has been on the card when he fought at UFC 290. He was on the card when he fought at UFC 285, I believe. Yes, that's correct. And I believe the same is true for UFC 282. Yes, it is. So in every case, Dricus du Plessis has been on the card with him before, and he's like a young DDP. He's looking up to the guy. They train at the same gym. DDP is obviously who you're going to train and emulate to be like if he's the best guy coming out of your gym when you're a youth. So I think that we're looking at, DDP Jr. And what does that mean? It means that he's a little bit awkward at times. It means he can make some mistakes. And it means that he's probably on all the steroids known to mankind. Now, when you look at a guy like C-Rod, Christian Rodriguez, he's a very talented fighter. The loss to Jonathan Pierce, I think everybody can forgive, because Jonathan Pierce, up a weight class from him, very dynamic guy, difficult for many guys to deal with at 145 pounds. The win over Joshua Weems, I'm not sure it means much to people, but it does show he's capable of finishing. The red flag is last time out, he did miss weight by 2.5 pounds against his opponent, Raul Rosas Jr., and he also dominated that fight as a plus 200 underdog, which is extremely impressive. But despite being in great positions, despite being in damaging positions, he wasn't able to get the finish. And I did think that was mildly concerning. I thought that it would have been a better look for him, and he probably would have shot right up the rankings, in terms of public perception, if he was able to get the finish there as well over Raul Rosas. But he was able to beat Reyes Cortez on the Contender Series back in the day. Charlampos Gregorio, a guy who just won on Contender Series and got signed to the UFC. So he's fought a pretty solid level of competition prior to getting to the organization. And in the UFC, Raul Rosas Jr. just went out there and showed, against Terrance Mitchell, common opponent to Cameron Saaiman, that he could deal with him easily in the first round, knock him out, knock him all over the place. So the Saaiman win, while impressive and while it was first, it was shown to be replicable by other guys in the division. So I think that this is a spot where both guys are going to be interesting prospects. You look at the 22-year-old Cameron Saaiman taking on the 25-year-old and Christian Rodriguez, and I do think that Christian Rodriguez is strong. I think he's physically developed, and I think that one concern for a 22-year-old is just that they might not have that full access to man strength that a guy like C-Rod, you would have to expect, going on 26 years of age, would clearly have by now. For a guy like C-Rod as well, he is coming into this matchup with a sneaky 4-inch reach advantage on paper, 71-inch reach compared to just 67-inch reach for Cameron Saaiman. So despite having a 1-inch height disadvantage, he's going to be 3 years older here, have a 4-inch reach advantage. And it seems like on Tapology, most votes are coming in heavily on the Saaiman side, but we're actually seeing Christian Rodriguez favored in the betting markets here. Christian Rodriguez, let me click over to the odds here, folks. Christian Rodriguez sitting around a minus 143 betting favorite across the market here. And, I kind of understand why C-Rod is favored. Do I think it's a little bit bullish? Yeah, I would probably put it at like a minus 125. Just again, this is instinctually off gut lean. This is not after taping it and looking at every detail of the matchup, but my instinctual feel here is a minus 125 C-Rod. Give the guys a little bit older and has the better wins in the UFC, the slight favorite distinction, book the even money on a popular underdog, probably in Cameron Saaiman. But I do also think that when you're looking at MMA Twitter, it is replete with people that are vocally supporting C-Rod, parting ways with their money. The line is not reflecting that. So unless there's a bevy of South African money in the market, unless there's a bunch of sharp money in the market already on the other side, I'm curious why the book is not respecting the known, and touted action coming in on the C-Rod side. So for me, this is one that I'll be watching the market throughout the week. As well. I'm curious to see how this fight plays out from a market dynamic standpoint, but you got two guys that are both 9 wins, in their professional career. So they're still young in the game. They have some, amateur experience as well to tout on the Christian Rodriguez side. Cameron Saaiman, he's also an undefeated amateur, undefeated as a professional. So Cameron Saaiman, he's never lost a fight, right? He's done a very good job going out there and getting wins. So it's hard to fade him, at significant chalk prices, but C-Rod is a very good fighter. So listen, I understand people coming in both ways, but here's the other thing. We're seeing a market dynamic where C-Rod, his last fight was a plus 200 underdog, and people were not wanting to be on his side. And now he's a minus 143 favorite, and everybody does want to be on his side. So I do think that should cause some speculation, at least that, some introspection, right? You want to just make sure you really consider the play before you fire when the market dynamics look like that. Next up, Darren Elkins taking on TJ Brown. And this is a fight where I'm not bullish on either one of these guys long-term at all. I will be looking to fade both of these guys more than likely. in most UFC fights. But I do think that Darren Elkins is kind of getting to the end of the road here, guys. He was able to get the win over Tristan Connolly, and that was a fine win, but Cub Swanson easily cleaned him up and finished him via knockout. You saw the Jonathan Pierce fight, pretty dominant, pretty bad performance there. And Jonathan Pierce, a guy that maybe showed a little bit of mercy even. I'd have to go back and rewatch, but I can't believe that fight didn't finish. He's always a bloody mess. He's always getting a lot of damage in his fights. Even in the fights he wins, he tends to get a little bit of a shit kicking in the early going, and that's tough to deal with. We always love a guy like Darren Elkins who puts it on the line, but he does seem to be coming to the end of the road here at 39 years of age. We talk about the book Fightnomics right here on the shelf, guys. Fightnomics talks about how frequent knockouts become for fighters over the age of 38. And TJ Brown, he says he's been sober, for a while in the lead up to this fight, which is good for him, in my opinion. I think he's got to do that in order to come in his best physical conditioning. And I think if he's conditioned to fight for 15 minutes here, he should win the fight. But moreover, I just think that if he's out there landing big shots on Darren Elkins, I think Darren is going to be wearing damage early, no pun intended. And I think he's going to be bloodied up really bad. I think this could be a mercy stoppage type fight. We've also seen Darren starting to get rocked more frequently in his fights, and I'm concerned for his health. So, yeah, I would never, ever in a million years bet TJ Brown at minus 200 chalk, but I would be curious what TJ Brown by KO is, when this fight comes around, because I think whether it's a cut stoppage or whether it's a clean knockout, I think that's most likely. Darren Elkins, not a guy who wants to concede, submit, quit, or get finished on the mat, but we've definitely seen that chin tested, and we've seen a lot of damage accrue over the years. So not wishing him any harm, but just trying to report to you guys what I believe is most likely to happen. And I think that TJ Brown might end up bloodying and bludgeoning a guy like Darren Elkins here. But money line side, I think you have to go with Darren Elkins, but it might be a tempting dog price that just doesn't come through, unfortunately. We're looking at a 1-inch reach advantage for TJ Brown of 72 inches and a 1-inch height advantage for Darren Elkins, 5'10" to just 5'9", but 6 years younger here for TJ Brown. And, the betting odds are way more reflective of TJ Brown being favored than the Tapology votes. So I think a lot of people, myself included, have a soft spot in their heart for Darren Elkins. But at 39, the show must go on. And unfortunately, nobody's Benjamin Button, right? He's not aging in reverse. So he's as old as he'll ever be, and he's been looking pretty old in his recent fights, unfortunately. Next up, we've got a women's bantamweight contest, guys. Another Brazil on Brazil matchup with Tainara Lisboa, the Thai Panther, excuse me. I called her the Thai Painter the last time she was around too. My bad. But she made me coins last time she was around. I bet on Tainara Lisboa, and I bet on her ITD in her UFC debut, so that was a good spot. But now we're looking at her taking on Ravena Oliveira. And guys, I do not know who Ravena Oliveira is. I would be doing you guys a disservice to give you a deep opinion on this fight. So what I can do is quickly pull up my drive and see what we've got on Tainara Lisboa that I can pull up. So here we are. So Tainara Lisboa, guys, you'll remember, fought Norma Dumont, and I thought she was doing a great job landing strikes in that fight. I thought she was landing clean, good shots, and it was an early MMA fight for her. But unfortunately, she ended up getting caught in a rear naked choke there. And that was when she was just a Muay Thai fighter. I believe she's a Muay Thai world champion, but she certainly comes from an adept striking background. But she's gotten much better on the mat. She's been working particularly on her ground game. And so it was no surprise that she was able to start pulling off some of those technical submission maneuvers late in the fight against Jessica Rose Clark. That was how I envisioned her getting the job done there, because Jessica Rose Clark has just been on the wrong end of some grappling exchanges to end out her UFC career, right? But overall, I think that Tainara Lisboa is a solid fighter, but she's also not a girl that I would be looking to back typically speaking, at massive chalk prices, minus 320, minus 350, minus 400. I'm not saying she's not going to win the fight, but again, just in terms of long-term strategy, if you guys have watched this show for a long time, betting relatively inexperienced WMMA fighters at minus 400 type prices, that's not really how I would look to bet this. So for me, probably be looking more towards things like a fight not to go the distance, the under, maybe a submission prop on either fighter, maybe a knockout prop or something. I'll probably just look to explore the prop market on a fight like this and look to see if there's any value to be had. But if not, I might just end up staying away here because I like Tainara Lisboa. And she's interacted, I think, with some of my tweets and stuff before. So I really appreciate that from her. But overall, I just think that this is a fight where, at 80% indication, there's certainly not value, I don't think, to be had on Lisboa unless her opponent is a complete can. So I have to watch Ravena. I don't know anything about her, but that's what I will do between now and the next time that I speak with you guys. So appreciate you guys that are joining us for the first look. If you guys are new here, make sure that you get subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for audio versions of the show, you can easily find them on podcast as well. All the information that you need to do that is in the description right below this video. So make sure that you check that out. Next up, guys, we got Terrance McKinney taking on Brendon Marotte. And speaking of guys I've never heard of, Brendon Marotte can count himself among them. No disrespect to the guy, but I don't know who he is, so I'm not going to speak out of turn. Taking a peek over at his topology, he appears to be another guy out of this New England cartel crew. We just saw one of their guys get signed on Contender Series. Made me a little bit of coins there. Shout out to the Special Forces guy, Air Force, I believe, Connor Matthews. So shout out to Connor Matthews getting it done on Contender Series last night for the troops and for USA. But in any case, also he did it for my bankroll, but in any case, we got Brendon Marotte here. And Marotte, he's another guy from New England Cartel. So I'm guessing that he's managed by Tyson Chartier. I'm going to look into all this, obviously, and come to you guys with real good opinions. But we got 3 wins in a row. He has lost to Adley Edwards, a 9-3 fighter, the Sunshine, who seems like a pretty decent Bellator fighter. So doesn't seem like he has any terrible losses on his resume. Seems like he has a decent amateur run as well. So a little bit of experience under his belt. And looking at his record, he's 2-1 in fights that go the distance. He's got most of his wins via early finish. So he kind of looks like a Terrance McKinney light. I'm not sure that he has the best cardio in the world. It does seem like he loses decisions as often as he wins them, but I'm going to do my full due diligence on a guy like Brendon before I give a big diatribe. But in any case, Terrance McKinney, he's a guy that's kill or be killed in the most classic sense of the word. He's never been to decision, right? All his wins by knockout or submission. He's been finished 4 times via knockout, 6-4 to the knockout. Not a good record for a prize fighter, admittedly, but 8-2 record to the submission. So he's done very well on the ground, historically speaking. Did get submitted by Nazim Sadikov in somewhat embarrassing fashion, but he was able to knock out Mike Breeden. He was able to submit Eric Gonzalez. He was able to submit Fares Ziem. He was able to knock out Matt Frivola, good fighter, and he did that very quickly. So a lot of things point to Terrance McKinney being a very, dangerous fighter, but he's also a guy that is a little bit of a coin flip, So he's certainly going to be a huge favorite in this spot. And I just have to look into his opponent before I have a real strong opinion here. But I'm never going to be laying minus 5XX on Terrance McKinney. It's just not how I work. Next up, guys, we got Irina Alekseeva taking on Melissa Dixon. Quick sip of the coffee, and we're getting into this women's matchup with 11 combined professional fights. My word. What have we here? Irina Alekseeva went out there in her last fight, and I took a small poke on her by sub. I believe I actually even have to double check that. But in any case, I just feel like I have a memory of celebrating her submitting Stephanie Edgar. But basically, I had said that I thought that whoever won the fight was going to win by sub. Both of these women like to take it to the mat, like to have those creative scrambling situations. And I've definitely looked into this girl. And She's a little bit weird, right? Her striking is no good, but I do think her grappling is strange and opportunistic and could be really dangerous for women in the UFC. Her opponent, on the other hand, looks to have a bunch of wins by TKO, ground and pound. So her record as an amateur looks very spotty, but as a professional, she is casually 5-0 here. So I don't really know what to make of this one, guys. We got a 32-year-old in Melissa Dixon taking on a 33-year-old in Irina Alekseeva, Russian Ronda. I would have to think that Russian Ronda is kind of being set up for success here, but I don't really know enough about Melissa Dixon to say. It does look like she's fighting on Fight Pass, so I'm sure the UFC would love to get behind this girl. But Irina Alekseeva is also a girl that seems like somebody that the UFC could get behind. Comes out there, gets a win over a very credentialed grappler via submission in her first UFC fight. I mean, I think that's very interesting stuff. And it seems like people are not very bullish on Irina in this fight for whatever reason. I guess they're still not sold on her after that last fight. I know that the knee bar is a little bit memeish, but I don't know. I just think that her grappling could be an interesting test case for these other women. And she is 2-1 to the decision. So it's got more experience in longer fights than her opponent. So let's see what happens here. Let's get back to Tapology and see what's next. Chris Gutierrez taking on Alatengheili. Alatang. I'm not exactly sure how it should be pronounced, but I hope that I'm doing a service to my guy. I hope that either one of those was correct because I tried my best. Wow. We're looking at Gutierrez here, and he was supposed to fight against Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson withdrew from the fight, unfortunately. I was going to be betting on Montel Jackson there. Now I'm a little bit more conflicted because we're getting Chris Gutierrez as a huge favorite, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that fact. His last fight, I think, was a way harder fight than this fight. I think this is a fight where if he keeps it at stand-up range, he's going to win this fight easily. But I do think that if he gets taken down in this fight, it could be a very difficult matchup for him. Alatengheili, I think, is smart enough to know he should go out there and try and pursue this guy on the mat. I think he's tried to use his tools to his advantage in the past. Does have 3 losses by knockout, so that's super concerning here. But it's been a while. Kai Asakura, last guy to knock him out all the way back in 2017. And since he came to the UFC, he's had good results. Beat Danabat Gari, albeit very close, controversial, some would say. Beat Ryan Benoit or Benoit. And he lost to Casey Kenny, got absolutely butchered with kicks in that fight. That's what's concerning here against a guy like Chris Gutierrez, who's excellent with the kicks. But we saw the draw against Gustavo Lopez, the quick win against Kevin Kroom via knockout, and the dominant win over my guy, personally, Chad and Hellinger, a guy I really like from the Contender Series. So I think that Alatengheili is continuing to get better at Fight Ready MMA. And I think that at 31 years of age, he still has a lot to prove. Yeah, I wouldn't count him out here. He's a big underdog in this spot, and I think that he could represent a live underdog. You're looking at the intangibles here, very similar reach. The height is definitely favorable for Gutierrez, but I think that might set up Alatengheili for his takedown attempts, and he's 1 year younger than Chris Gutierrez. So Gutierrez, no spring chicken, came off a pretty dominant loss against Pedro Munoz there. I bet Pedro Munoz is an underdog. He got the win, so I might have to bet Alatengheili as an underdog and see if he could do the same thing here. Last and least, no, I'm kidding. Last but not least, we got Ashley Yoder taking on Emily Ducote in the women's strawweight division. And Emily Ducote, she let us down a little bit in her last fight. We expected more from her on this show, and she was getting thrown around by Lupita Godinez, getting beat up in that fight, getting diddy bopped on the feet a little bit. And we also saw against Angela Hill, she got outworked, she got out-volumed, she just got touched a little bit too much. So I think that in this fight, she's got a lot to prove. She beat Jessica Panay, but she's not finished anybody yet in the UFC. And Ashley Yoder, never been finished in the UFC, but she's 8-8 overall as a professional. She's just not very good. She's 3-7 in the UFC. And I think that the UFC doesn't necessarily need to keep her around. I think they're just keeping her around because she's fought tough, because she hasn't gotten finished in most of these fights. But she's not a very fun fighter to watch, in my view. So for me, I'm just looking at this and saying, like, Emily Ducote, I think, is a fun fighter. I think she's dangerous. I think she could win this fight. And yeah, She did lose to Kanako Marotte via split decision, but that fight, she got taken down a bunch and threw up a lot of dangerous submissions. Ashley Yoder could take her down. That's the danger. But Ashley Yoder at 35 years of age, I just have never really liked what I've seen from her. And I'm looking right now. American Top Team OKC is what is listed for Emily Ducote. So I kind of want to look into who exactly she's training with, but I think she's a BJJ black belt in her own right. So if she can keep this on the feet, I think she's going to butcher Ashley Yoder. But even if this fight goes to the mat, I think she's still somewhat live as well. So maybe too big of a favorite price tag, but I don't know that I could bring myself to bet Ashley Yoder in the year of our Lord 2023. With that being said, guys, we have done it in just under an hour. We broke down the first look at these fights. I think it's a interesting card. I think there's definitely some live underdogs, but I also am not the most bullish on this fight card first look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive in. I'm going to dig into the research and I'm going to see if I can find angles on these fights. And if I do, happy to come here, bring those to you guys as well on the Bets and Banter show. I think we're going to be doing that tomorrow. Stay tuned for an announcement coming very shortly. If you guys don't already, you can find all my other stuff at Liam Picks Fights on Twitter. You can find me everywhere at Liam Picks Fights. That's on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Patreon as well. So if you guys are looking to go deeper as I do the research, I post it all first to my Patreon. However, I do come to you guys each and every week with the same kind of information, with the same kind of breakdown. So it's all up to you. But either way, I want to say, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you drop a like on the way out. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you get subscribed to the channel if you're not already, because we're talking fights like this each and every week. And make sure that you come back next time because we're going to have all the same fun again. God bless. Good luck. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.